Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year's 2022. It is my great pleasure to be here once again on the Sunday morning link and to serve at the pleasure of the Mangala Shibhuti lineage and to deliver this New Year's address. And every year I have some interesting contemplations on how we will start our New Year cycle of link talks. And each New Year seems to have a very different flavor. And that flavor can sometimes be sweet, can sometimes be bitter, or very sour, or salty in an unexpected way. And thinking about the reason why we celebrate a new year and why our journey around the sun or the beginning of a new lunar cycle is important. Of course, it marks the time for us. It marks maybe our accomplishments, but it also marks a fresh start as well. And it is customary to make new resolutions for the new year and to look to the future and how we will approach this new year to set the tone and to give up old behaviors and to adopt new, better behaviors, to kind of celebrate that clean slate, as it were. Now, in our own particular tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, the slate is not really wiped clean each year, because we don't just assume that everything that has happened before has gone away, or that our past does not matter, or our past actions do not matter. They certainly do. And it is one of our main contemplations that we will reflect on our past actions, that we will reflect on the effects of our past actions, and how we will work with our own merit in the future, and how we will motivate ourselves, how that reflection on both our past negative actions and the suffering that arises from them, or how we have been in samsara from time without beginning and met so many other beings and had so many other interactions with beings who were our parents and friends in previous lives, and how this is all very relevant to our practice. It is what inspires us to take on the path of Dharma. It is what inspires us to live a meaningful life, and to use this precious opportunity we have right now, this precious human birth right now, to adopt a spiritual path and to make the best of this human rebirth with all the freedoms and advantages. So for a Buddhist practitioner, it's not really about the clean slate, but it is about the fresh intention to make this year meaningful, to make this year vibrant by reflecting on the past year or reflecting on the year to come, and to take that message to heart. To say, I will, at this time, on this new uh, solar calendar year or this new lunar calendar year when Losar rolls around, I will take this opportunity to really reaffirm my own intentions, to reaffirm my own commitment to living a meaningful life. And how does that look in a given year? It's hard to say what the year will look like circumstantially. We've had so many surprises over the past year, which maybe we couldn't have predicted, or maybe we could have predicted, but um, certainly many of them were a surprise to us anyways. And I imagine there will be surprises in the new year as well. But we don't really have the ability to control appearances. We don't have the ability to control the way the world turns or how conditions may manifest, because they will manifest based on conditions and past actions, and when all the causes and conditions come together, they will manifest how they manifest as cause and effect. However, that does not ever impede us from making a very personal resolution, a New Year's resolution, to meet the new year with something akin to a transformative power, our own attitude, our own aspiration, our own willingness to step up to challenges, to step up to various conditions, and to say, I will be of greatest benefit that I can be to all beings. I will not let the dictum of my ego tell me the way things should be. I will not let my own sense of preferences and attachments and prejudices color in my year before it has even started, like a picture book. I already have these assumptions or desires or attachments to how I want the future to look. And any time I am contradicted in that assertion, then my mind is disturbed, or then I feel lost or confused or forlorn or disappointed. As Atisha said in the Lojong verses, or as Chikawa Ishe Dorje compiled the Lojong text of the 7 points of mind training, one of those later points is to give up any hope of fruition. And it's such a poignant verse to me, because this is a time for aspiration. This is a time for making those resolutions, to make those wishes, to make those prayers. And I see this as a very different thing from simply hoping. I think they get equated many times, where if you make a wish, that is the same as hope. But I think when we have some sort of expectation, when we have some kind of attachment to the way things will be in the future, then we tend to give over our own ability to change the world or meet the world to that set of preferences. which the ego holds, expecting things to be a certain way. But all I can say with life within samsara is that we must expect the unexpected, because change is very expected. Impermanence is very expected, and so we can expect the unexpected. Things will not always look the way we want them to. However, that is very different than making prayers. That is very different from making aspirations and new resolutions. I think when we make prayers, sometimes it's a way of being engaged on the most minimal level, not really coming forth and doing something physically, but just saying, thoughts and prayers, best wishes, and many people are upset by that. However, I think prayers are immensely powerful, and these wishes are immensely powerful, not because they somehow run off and do the work for us, but if a wish is genuine, if a prayer is genuine, and it really comes from that deep place of compassion and kindness and sympathetic joy, and most importantly, equanimity, not holding anything back because of out of preferences, again, or out of prejudices, but really making a genuine wish full of the four measurables for the benefit of other beings. How does that not transform something within us? And so then when we have that opportunity to be engaged, when we have that opportunity to contribute something in a more physical or direct way, how can we miss that opportunity? I think prayers and wishes, among the benefits that come about through supplicating the deities and the different benefactors there are in the world, aside from those benefits, making genuine prayers, making genuine aspirations for the benefit of other beings really sets the tone for how we can directly benefit other people. We don't always see the opportunity, we may not always understand exactly how we can benefit, but I have not seen anyone who really has the genuine wish to benefit others pass up an opportunity when it was handed to them, when it was presented. Whereas I have seen many people who have their own interests on their mind. I have seen opportunities to help others presented to them, and those opportunities get passed over because even though they maybe said they send thoughts and prayers, it wasn't really penetrative. It didn't really come from that deep-seated place. It wasn't an aspiration or a wish or a prayer that they really held in their heart. And you can see how that lack of a genuine prayer really plays out later on with how we engage with the world, how we spend our time in the future. So it starts with the aspiration. All bodhicitta starts with aspiration bodhicitta. All bodhisattva action starts with the prayer to benefit other beings, to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, and to work towards that benefit when the situation arises, when there is an opportunity. Because opportunities don't present themselves all the time, but when they do, we must be ready for it. And we must be ready with a genuine aspiration, a genuine wish to benefit others. Because that is the only way we rise to the challenge of change and impermanence in the year to come. That is how we rise out of samsara. That is how we rise out of our own neurosis and habitual tendencies, out of our own deep mental fog, timuk, which gives way to attachment and to aggression and to jealousy and pride. We have to rise above those things by letting go of that set of preferences that comes along with the ego. And within that set of preferences is somewhat the hope that this future year will look a very particular way. Some of those hopes may be benevolent or less self-involved than others, but I think that when we really have some attachment to the way things will be, it tends to be more along the lines of meeting our preferences. If a wish isn't fulfilled, we don't necessarily despair because the wish wasn't fulfilled. We continue working towards it. A wish isn't just a passing thing or something that we write off to someone else or we outsource to the universe. A genuine bodhisattva wish is something that we hold deep in our heart, and we will take responsibility for that with our own engagement bodhicitta, our own direct action when we have the opportunity. Outsourcing our wishes and our hopes, I think that's more what is being referred to in the Lojong slogans by Atisha. So we cannot outsource the responsibility for our own mind. We cannot outsource our own actions and the aspirations we have to be a benefit in the world, to be the change we wish to see in the world, as Gandhi said. We have to be the change we want to see. And that involves the wish, that involves the aspiration, and it involves maybe the patience as well to see when those opportunities arise and to hold our mind with an uplifted sense of love and compassion and light rather than succumb to pessimism or disappointment. Because there is a great deal in the world that does not go according to our preferences. Most of life does not work out according to our preferences. And so if we were to rely on just the way things go outside ourselves, then we would always be disappointed or jaded. So it's not for us as practitioners to rely so much on outer circumstances to validate our path or validate our ability to work with our mind. Of course, there has to be some supportive conditions, and we can ideally create these supportive conditions through generating merit and taking on those actions which will increase our ability to help others. And we take on those meritorious acts through generosity itself, by being that change we wish to see in the world, by seeking those opportunities to help others and to go beyond ourself. And that in turn further supports us in our wish and aspiration to be of more benefit towards others. So as long as we have this strong aspiration to be of benefit to beings, and we are willing to act on that, not just as some kind of wish we tie off on a branch and leave there for someone else to accomplish, but something that we really take to heart and hold, then the merit from that will continue to support us in accomplishing our aims. We become our own resource for doing good in the world. As long as we are genuine in our wish and we are willing to be engaged. So that is a wonderful thing about this path. And as we move into this new year, and we may have challenges, we may have different obstacles that arise, and I'm sure we will. Recent years have shown that there's always something that will come up. There's always something. And looking back at the news stories from the past year, I realize how many things I even missed during this year that, I don't know, kind of set a tone, or maybe set someone over the edge, or some event that was kind of discouraging. But there was always something, there was always an event, there was always a challenge, a test. And I don't mean to justify any of the obstacles or challenges that we've faced. No one can really justify samsara. It is just cause and effect. You don't justify, you don't make it right. You don't say, oh, it turns out that it was a challenge, but, it also, had a good side. It's not to justify these things, but it is to say our own attitude, our own aspiration to meet these challenges. Again, it doesn't justify things, but it does transform our own engagement with the world. It does transform what is possible in this world when we take very deliberate steps to rise to the challenge, to let go of our own set of preferences and say, this is how I'm going to meet impermanence with compassion, with understanding, and with a tender heart. That tender heart may be made more tender by the challenges that we have seen recently. And that tenderness can maybe knock us down a little bit. But when we use that tenderness to open our hearts and to make a genuine aspiration to benefit others, then it's not as if, again, we justify the situation, but we have done something which the ego could not do. The ego on its own could not do. We open up to a greater sense of meaning in the world. We open up to a greater ability to meet the world. When that tenderness or that pain or that tightness comes from seeing impermanence or experiencing impermanence or change or suffering, the tendency is to want to hide or run, but that's the ego's tendency. And you can't really run. Maybe you can run from the place, you can run from the circumstances, but you can't run from your own mind. But the ego tries. That self-centered attachment, it tries to run from itself. It tries to run from the mind and the experiences of the mind. But we can't really run from our experiences. And as we try to run, they tend to haunt us. And we might try to overlay them with more experiences. We may try to bury them in, distractions and pleasures. But in the end, they're still there. And we can't pile pleasures and distractions on ourselves forever because of impermanence. Because we can't really control how things will go in the world. But if we take that supreme moment of tenderness when we see suffering and the cause of suffering, and we take the steps to undercut that cause of suffering and to use it to open our hearts to be the change we want to see in the world, then it is as Atisha says, or Chikawa Yeshe Dorje has compiled in the 7 Points of Mind Training, you use the obstacle as the path to liberation. You transform that obstacle into the path of liberation by stoking the flame of compassion, by stoking the flame of kindness and sympathetic joy and equanimity, by generating bodhicitta in such a way that it is not a candle being passed from hand to hand. It is a candle which is used to light other candles. And by doing so, the flame spreads. It is not just contained to one vessel. And that is what we can do by making a strong aspiration for this new year. I have no doubt there will be challenges this year. And I have wondered how I came through the challenges of the previous year. Not that I had many direct challenges myself, I can't claim that, but I know that many of us are directly impacted and many of us are indirectly impacted. And we all have some experience of that tender moment where we have to decide how we meet our mind, how we meet this experience of life, how we meet this new year. And I've wondered how I was able to roll with it or how I didn't roll with it. And how at sometimes I was jaded and I have been cynical, and how that did not help at all. It didn't help me, didn't help anyone, and was more self-indulgent or self-righteous. Again, outsourcing the cause of suffering, outsourcing what could be done about it, which is quite disempowering. Cynicism may sound clever, or it may be quite good at assigning blame, but it is ultimately self-defeating, because it almost lets us off the hook. There's nothing we can do, and so all we can do is stew in our own gnarly feelings. Which is not helpful. And the things that have made a difference for me are those times when I saw the challenge, not just the challenge outside, but the challenge inside. In my own mind, when I felt tender and the cynicism started to rise, and I took that opportunity to say, I'm going to open my heart. I am going to let go of my own set of preferences. And no matter what the world brings, I will meet it with compassion. I will meet it with kindness. And I will look for those opportunities to be of benefit to others. And I may not always know what that looks like, but the wish will remain strong in my heart, and I will jump at the opportunity when I find it. And maybe that sounds a little vague or non-committal, but it has to start with the wish. It has to start with the motivation. Because as we know in the Dharma path, motivation really makes the difference. There's, of course, the actual effect of the action, but it is the motivation and the internal aspects which transform our minds. And by transforming our minds, our actions are then transformed. And when our actions are transformed, our world is transformed. And so we have to start somewhere. And this year, let us start with a strong aspiration, a strong New Year's resolution to be the change we wish to see in the world, to take obstacles onto the path and transform them into the path of awakening. It takes training to do this. It takes mind training to overcome those habitual tendencies and self-focus. But that is also a joyful challenge as well. Not quite like exercising physically, where you get those physical endorphins, or however. I think getting into shape is a big New Year's resolution for most people. This year I'm going to get ripped. This year I'm going to lose the holiday weight or something like that. This year I'm going to look fantastic naked. And that's great. But I think there's another opportunity here to not exactly get our mind jacked, but to really beef up our bodhicitta, to really make sure that it is strong and unshakable, and that it will carry us through this year. It will serve the purpose that we want it to serve, that we will serve our own mind, our own interest in a larger sense by benefiting others. We will serve our own path to enlightenment, and we will serve the benefit of others. So that is of paramount importance to me. And I have a great deal of trepidation in saying, this year let's take obstacles onto the path, because that sounds so rough to those who have had so many challenges. But what else can I do? I don't see any other way forward myself. And I'm not going to insist that, everyone suddenly change and be better. This is my own aspiration. And I hope that it inspires others to do the same. And that we all meet our own minds and we all develop this protection of bodhicitta, this mind protection of bodhicitta and egolessness, which can serve us so well in this coming year, and which will also support others who are having a difficult time, to meet those who are going through samsara this coming year in a difficult way, and that we can meet them with compassion and kindness. And that will also serve our own path, but really that's not the point. It is that we have the wish to benefit others, and we take the opportunity to either reach out or to support or to continue to make wishes, however we can engage with other beings, however we can extend beyond ourselves, and to have a tender heart and not to have so much judgment or or have preferences about how other people must be before we have compassion for them. There are so many divisions because our wishes get hampered by preferences. I would help, but only if they were such and such, or only if they did such and such, or only if they believed such and such. That's not going to help our own wishes and aspirations. That's not going to really be of any benefit. So, having the tender heart and wish to extend, and then to really do so, and not to be held back by our own small-minded ego. If we can really stick to that, I think no matter what challenges the year brings, it will be a good year. Of course, I've had some slip-ups and I've fallen over the past few years, but I've always managed to pick myself up because that's my responsibility, to pick myself up in my own mind. And it's not as if I've been compassionate all year last year or the past few years. It's not as if I've been without judgments or criticism or cynicism. But by picking myself back up, by continuing to engage in this practice, to really take this mind training seriously and do my utmost to open my heart, I feel that regardless of the challenges, I have had a good year this last year, this last few years. And I am confident that with this practice, I will have a good year this coming year. Not because it is a year tailored to my preferences, but because it is a year that opens my heart more and more. And that is the point of this path, that is the point of this practice. And if we engage in it, if we commit to it, as it is said, how could it not work? How could it leave us hanging if we fully engaged in that way, if we were willing to meet those challenges? So I don't think it'll let me down. And that is my New Year's resolution. Pretty much the same as it has been, but maybe with more clarity and hopefully more progress. And I think it really has served. And I feel the great support of our lineage and our teacher and our Sangha and the Dharma, the support of the 3 jewels, 4 jewels, including Kongtrul Rinpoche. And I have not high hopes for this year, but I have a great deal of confidence in the power of these aspirations, in the power of these resolutions. So that is my resolution for this year, and I hope it is a resolution for all of us, so that we can really meet this year with the greatest integrity and love. If there are any questions?
Thank you, Dungse La. appears we have no questions at the moment.
Really?
Are there any questions here? Oh, we do have one.
Oh, you right? Okay. I thought you put your hand I often contemplate this preferences that we're talking about today. Because being in retreat, we have to let go of a lot and maintain integrity. I might have preference to a schedule or the way I like things. But there's kind of in the letting go, there's a lot of joy too, because you're meeting things as they are. You're stepping in and seeing it as it is, which is this path that we're on. So I'm just trying to think about what my question would be around that. I think this is actually kind of interesting. I also find that, which you might laugh when I say this, but as we step outside of our preferences, also the internal and external drama tends to really, really subside. And I always find that it's like an indicator of maybe that I'm doing better at this when things are a little less rambunctious. And I always find that something I kind of ponder for myself is, can you speak to that a bit more? Because I feel like you have so much to say on that. Because you're somebody when I look at, I see that they exemplify that in their own unique way.
Well, drama is an addictive thing. Otherwise, how does Hollywood continue running? There's a show there aren't too many shows that I watch to the end, but I like stories, and I did watch this one show which had the end of every season, there was always some kind of twist, and just, there's most shows probably, but it had just so much drama at the end. And it's because like one small thing, like if only there was one small concession or one small shift of attitude, or one person just, admitted that maybe they made a mistake, or if one person reconciled, then the whole show would be over. And that they didn't. And it's because of personal preferences. The ego said, no, my life must be A, B, C, D. And if one of those is missing, then I'm going to burn down the world. And that's kind of how TV shows are. Because that's what moves the plot along. You have to have drama, you have to have conflict. And we don't really want conflict in our own life. Maybe we want excitement, and we may even thrive on drama, but it's exhausting. And it comes from ego. It comes from those preferences where we just refuse to yield our preferences. What is it? When two people are in a debate, when someone makes it's a concession, or it's a compromise. Yeah. We don't really like making compromises. And to a certain extent, I think it's good not to make compromises with samsara. I think it's good not to compromise our integrity of practice. I think it's important not to compromise our kindness and compassion for the sake of ego. But ego itself doesn't want to make any compromises. And that's where most of the conflict is. When the ego doesn't want to compromise, ego never wants to compromise, but then life doesn't work according to the ego. So when we come up against those challenges, it's drama, more conflict, needless conflict, senseless conflict. So letting go of those conditions, I think, is a really good thing. Being uncompromising with the path on the other hand, being uncompromising in our practice, and maybe not just the outer forms of our practice, but specifically uncompromising with bodhicitta, that's different. Because the ego doesn't really bring anything to the table, it just brings more of itself. Whereas bodhicitta brings freedom, it brings more compassion, it brings more means, more ability, more joy. So there's no downside in sticking to bodhicitta, whereas siding with the ego and siding with its preferences and its uncompromising demands doesn't, it's just investing in a bad investment. It's throwing more, what is it, throwing good money after bad or something like that. So we don't want that kind of ego investment. We want to invest in something that does pay the right dividends. And that thing is bodhicitta. That investment is bodhicitta because it really brings us all that we want. We just have to recognize that.
That was really wonderful. It made me think, I was just thinking when you were talking about personal integrity and not wanting to be pushed around, the nose ring metaphor, somebody grabbing you. Because when we have preferences, sometimes there's a strong need needing to be met. So when you were speaking, I was thinking, well, how would I negotiate that edge? And I think you just answered it by saying bodhicitta. Because we can still maintain the integrity while leaning into something to get our own, we do have needs, But then also it's kind of that quality of mind that's approaching that kind of difficult, or it doesn't even need to be difficult situation maybe. So I'm just kind of contemplating with you, so thank you.
Yeah, don't get pulled into the drama.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have a few more questions rolling in.
Oh, good.
This is from Emma Back.
Oh,
Lately, I have felt painfully aware of the limits of my bodhicitta, as well as how solid, indeed, my sense of self really is. What would you recommend when it feels like there is a lot of self-created suffering in seeing these limits, and how far I have to go before my bodhicitta is pure and my sense of self-clinging truly reduced? How does this not become its own drama with a lot of emotion, as well as its own form of self-absorption?
well, there is a Lojong verse for this, I believe. Begin the sequence of taking with oneself. This is somewhat the warning that we shouldn't practice Dharma according to samsara, and that when we generate bodhicitta, but we generate bodhicitta with this idea that the ego is real or the ego is somehow a part of us or an intrinsic part of us, then every time we generate bodhicitta, it's like we have to put ourselves down. Or anytime we don't generate bodhicitta, it's bad me, I'm not generating bodhicitta. So there's a lot of self-criticism there. And as it says in, I'm not entirely sure where this is, if you can't develop compassion for yourself, it's very difficult to develop compassion for others. If you can't develop the wish to attain enlightenment for yourself, it's very difficult to wish that for others. And that is why bodhisattvas are kind of held even above one's own parents in their love and compassion, because they wish things for us that even our own parents didn't consider or haven't considered for themselves or didn't even occur to them. So that is why their compassion is said to be the greatest. If we are unable to separate our own nature of mind from the apparent ego, which is really empty of an intrinsic existence, then anything we do on the path generating bodhicitta, compassion, kindness, etc., we are not really making those strides according to the Dharma. We're making them according to the ego's own validation. Ego doesn't need to be praised, it just needs to be validated. Ego likes to be praised, but really what it wants is just to be recognized and noticed. And so being hard on ourselves, being self-critical, being, again, pessimistic, it really just plays right back into the ego's hands. And so it is important to realize that this self has challenges, this small self has challenges, but the point is not to attack ourselves or to criticize ourselves for having too little bodhicitta, to find some way of being kind with ourselves is another way of developing that for other people as well. This is, again, the practice of equanimity. It's not just that we hold all beings to be equal and then somehow we are excluded from that. We're the only bad person in existence. And all other beings are equal, and I will have love and compassion for all other beings, but I suck. That doesn't work out. So we have to recognize our own Buddha nature. We have to recognize our own freedom from an intrinsic self and apply that as a way of connecting with other people too. That is also how we connect with others, by seeing the commonality, by seeing the common struggle with this dramatic little rascal. So I would suggest that, again, if any of us fall short in our own standards, and again, it might even be the ego's standards, or if any of us fall down in our practice, if we can rise back up, if we can just pick ourselves back up and continue, that is the best, not to stay down. And over time, things will develop. And that is something that we see more and more these days. I don't think there was so much self-criticism in the past. It's kind of a modern phenomena to have so much self-criticism, or to not be good enough to be a practitioner, or to not be good enough to have genuine bodhicitta. But don't even worry about it being genuine. Don't even worry about it being the greatest bodhicitta anyone has ever seen. Work up to it. Again, if it's the ego's standards that we're living by, then it's not going to help us so much. I accept a low seat. Don't have such expectations or demands on yourself, and say, I am a being with some kind of small self-esteem, and I will make a little bodhicitta. And that little bodhicitta I will cultivate into a larger bodhicitta. And through my own small efforts, it will generally grow, and I will nurture that bodhicitta. And again, don't kind of limit yourself to being a small person or a humble person, but it doesn't have to be the greatest bodhicitta. You can start small. You can start wherever you are and go from there. The point is that you keep going, and it will develop in time. That's one of those tricky ways the ego gets in there with our practice. It's so funny to see how we expect bodhicitta to somehow pick us up on giant wings and lift us up, and if it doesn't, I did it wrong. I wasn't a good practitioner, and so the effect is that my bodhicitta is small. It's not that. It's that we have to look deeper for that natural affinity, that natural sympathy with others, and that includes an understanding of ourself separate from the ego, that we are not defined by the ego, we are not defined by the small self, and that it is illusory. So why be constrained by its mandates, by its dictation? Even that we must be the greatest practitioner. Again, that's the ego's assessment. So be a small practitioner, be a large practitioner, be any practitioner as long as you're practicing.
Thank you very much, Dungse La. We have a couple comments, and it looks like we also have one more online question, and it looks like we have a in the shrine room question here too. So maybe I can just say from Lita, she says, "Thank you, Dungse La." And from Mark, I believe this may be, I'm assuming this is Mark Cram. "Thank you, Dungse La, for your well-stated and reflective consideration of aspiration as a way to launch this new year. It is helpful to be reminded of the importance of stopping our momentum to return to a point of equanimity at every opportunity. A powerful message." And should we take a question from the shrine room?
Yes, and then we'll take the one from online.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dungse. I find a lot of times when it comes to, well, both in meditation and post-meditation practice, both applies, but more noticeably in post-meditation, or not on the cushion. I find often when I have the most, or the, relatively difficult situation, not ultimately that difficult, but, somebody says something annoying to me or that I feel, frustrated by or whatever, it just riles up my ego. And then I've just found, I think, I know that, like, I've heard enough of the Dharma where I know the antidote. I know what to do with that in terms of if I were to just really think about what I've heard from, the teachers. But really the challenge is, like, applying it and having the vigilance to just be brave and do it, just with all the different, reasonings of the relative and absolute truth and all the different knowledge that is there and all the different things that are said. So basically it just comes down to, I don't have enough conviction and vigilance and perseverance to apply in the most best situations to apply. So I'm wondering, and then I think often it's said, like, more contemplation on the four thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma and more contemplation on the four immeasurables. But then I have another problem, which is it's sometimes those meditations are very good and vibrant and, like, have a lot of energy and so forth, and then sometimes they're just, like, it's like running on a treadmill or something,
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to know what your advice would be for applying the Dharma when it's most important.
Well, you list these things as problems, but they're not really problems, it's just the situation. What you're looking for is for everything to click and coalesce, or for that motivation to be there, just to show up. And sometimes it doesn't. What it takes is maybe more merit, and without merit, even though we know things, they don't always click. But we can generate more merit, and things will click then. And we can develop merit through practicing itself. So continuing to practice can also lead to the conditions that will help our practice click. And also, it takes time. If we simply knew these things in our hearts after hearing them, then most of us wouldn't be here, I think. Rinpoche has given he's given these teachings on the words of my perfect teacher. How many years? 30 years. So 3 decades before you were born. So, if it just clicked after a year or two of practice or retreat, then great. But no, I think it takes time for things to click, and we have habitual tendencies, and those get in the way, and we need more merit and more time for everything to come together. Even though we think we know things, I mean, we hear the same text decades after decades, and then at one point we hear it, and the merit is there, or the understanding is there, or the experience is there, and it's like, how did I miss that the first 29 times? So don't hold these things as challenges. It's just, maybe they're challenges, but it's just kind of the way it is too. We have to work with these things. It's not as if you have the challenge, and that's so unique to you. And it takes some effort for things to come together. It takes some ability, and it does take courage, but I've seen you do a back handspring on the edge of a cliff. So courage may not be the issue here. I've seen you do some things which I thought, we'll never see him grow up to be a practitioner. But here you are, and that's great. You didn't perish. You had enough merit in those situations. So you'll develop it here, and it'll come to you in time. And if it feels like there is a block, take some further steps to focus on merit and where that can be applied in your practice, and identify the challenges not as this is my problem or this is the problem that prevents me from moving forward. No, that's the challenge that will help you move forward, because we take obstacles as the path. So we don't allow obstacles to impede us. Even our own lack of merit is a chance for us to develop merit. So just keep going.
Yeah, it was like, sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but I think that was the thing that I was kind of wondering about is like, when things feel very nice and I'm in my nice cabin and I'm looking over the nice San Luis Valley and and everything is quite peaceful and I feel like I have some whatever.
Well, then do what Kadampas do. And again, this is the other face of begin the sequence of taking with oneself. Take on your own future obstacles. Request for difficulties. Request challenges from your future merit. Supplicate for a new challenge to work through so that you can burn that off. If you feel like you're too complacent because things are good, you can enjoy that, or you could do what a Kadampa practitioner would do and say, send me a challenge. If Milarepa didn't have challenges thrown in his face, then he wouldn't have become the great master we know today. Those challenges were thrown at him. He didn't really solicit them. He kind of did by taking on the teacher that he did. But the Kadampas, when there are no challenges, they seek the challenges. So you can do that. It's only a slight brag, like, oh, I'm here at something, I have no problems. I know what you mean.
Thank you very much, Dungse La. And our next question comes from our online listener, Murray Nossel. He says, Dearest Dungse La, it has been such an honor and pleasure to be a part of this year's Nundor retreat and to experience your leadership and confidence in the path. I love what you say about not being able to do anything to change the circumstances ahead of us. Sorry. Oh, but what we can have is absolute certainty and confidence in the three jewels. I once heard Rinpoche say that confidence is not something you simply wake up and feel. It's not automatic. Rather, we have to actively cultivate confidence in the view. I would love to hear your reflections on confidence. Much love, Murray.
Well, thank you, Murray. The method for developing confidence really comes with the three wisdoms. And we speak about the three wisdoms generally in context with the teachings, where there is hearing wisdom, where we hear the teachings, and there are the ways to listen to the teachings, and then there is contemplative wisdom, which contemplates the teachings and examines the words and teases out the meaning and the essential points, and then meditative wisdom, where we put that teaching into practice and we see it with our own direct experience and we feel the benefit of that. So that's how we generally develop confidence, but we may not always apply the idea of the three wisdoms to situations outside of receiving a teaching directly. All confidence has to arise somewhat from hearing or kind of experiencing and then contemplating on the experience, contemplating on what we've heard or what we are beginning to understand, or how we accept these outer conditions, or how we accept the challenges that come into our life, how we process that with the teachings, how we process our own life and experience, and then finally applying Dharma practice to those situations and saying, does this help? Does this work? Does this bodhicitta, in fact, uplift my life? Not just from like the technical understanding of the Four Noble Truths and the Four Immeasurables and so on, but do I really see for myself the suffering of samsara and the cause of suffering? Not just because it was taught to me, but I see it. Like I'm seeing it. And when I see that, when I have that experience and I take it into myself and I'm kind of thinking, how do I work with this? How do I deal with this experience to then say, okay, how does this work in terms of the Dharma? How does my understanding of Dharma or my own history or my own understanding of, attachment to self play a role in this? And does letting go of my attachment to self play a role in this? And then finally applying the teaching and saying, okay, so when I experience suffering, when I experience these conditions, I will apply this, and I'm just going to see what happens. That's how we develop confidence, when our experience is validated by more experience, when our challenges are validated by practice. And that's an ongoing process. We develop confidence through experience. We develop it through the three wisdoms, not just by receiving teachings, but by really applying teachings, by really taking the teachings into our life, into all sorts of circumstances. And that's really where the confidence comes from. And we need to give time for that confidence to arise. Or we just have pure faith, which is unquestioning from the very beginning. And that takes a lot of merit. it's interesting what we have faith and confidence in without having tested anything. We have the ego has its own kind of idea of faith, assumption, lots of assumptions. The ego assumes a great deal of things, that things will go our way, that things should be a certain way according to its own preferences. But when we test that assumption, it doesn't hold up. We need to test our own assumptions. We need to test our own faith to see if it is blind or if it is genuine. And when we test and when we see that it is genuine, and when we see that it is not unfounded, that it comes from a really grounded place, then there is confidence. There is really unshakable confidence, unshakable faith, as it says in the words of my perfect teacher. That unshakable faith that really comes from the direct experience of our own mind and our own nature, and having gone through the four thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma and so on. So confidence is elusive, and many people appear to have confidence, or kind of like swaggering confidence or unfounded confidence, but we're looking for something more solid, tested. And so even if we appear to have confidence, we should still test that. We should still be aware of what foundation our confidence is built on. And maybe I have confidence because I was raised in this tradition, but even then I have to test it quite a lot to make sure that it's not an assumption, or it's not something that I tacked on to my identity as some sort of ornament to ego. So going through the three wisdoms, hearing, contemplating, and meditating, that's where the genuine confidence comes from. And I think I've built a lot of confidence over the past couple of years in regards to this talk I've just given. And that's what gives me the confidence for this new year, that with the practice, with this kind wish and bodhicitta, that we will persevere. So that is where my confidence comes from.
Dungsela, thank you very much. And it's about quarter past the top of the hour, and I think all our questions have been fielded. So thank you so much, Dungsela, for your kindness and generosity in sharing your personal reflections and your own very clear and applicable New Year's resolution. What a wonderful way to start the new year. And thank you all for joining in today, listening to the link. Please tune in next week when Chris Holland will be giving the link. And please join us for the closing chants.
Let's take this time to really dedicate the merit of this to the new year and to our own aspiration and kind wish for this year. Let's really set the tone.
This merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy of wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings, emulating the hero Manjushri, Samantabhadra, and all those with knowledge. I too make a perfect dedication of all actions that are positive, emulating the hero Manjushri, Samantabhadra, and all those with knowledge. I do make a perfect dedication of all actions that are positive, emulating the hero Manjushri, Samantabhadra, and all those with knowledge. I do make a perfect dedication of all actions that are positive. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more.